Welcome back to Family Cooking Time with Flatbread and Cheese Making. Today we'll be making two things, mozzarella cheese and flatbread. I recommend making the recipes over 2 different days, starting with the mozzarella cheese first, then the flatbread. However, the great thing about these recipes is that they're flexible enough that you can make them in any order over the course of one day or several, whatever works for you. So let's get started. Your kit for mozzarella cheese making will include citric acid, a rennet tablet, salt, latex gloves, and cheesecloth. You'll provide 1 gallon of milk. Some of the tools you'll need include a large stock pot, measuring cups and spoons, a strainer, bowl, slotted spoon, large knife, and a good thermometer. Begin by mixing 1½ teaspoons of citric acid with 1 cup of warm water. Stir and set aside until dissolved. Now crush the rennet tablet. I use a pill crusher, but you can also use a rolling pin or a knife. Try to break it into a fine powder to make it easier to dissolve in the water. Add the crushed tablet to 1/4 cup of warm water and set aside. Now add a gallon of milk to the stock pot and then add the citric acid and stir. The better milk, the better the cheese. You can make mozzarella from 2% whole milk, 1% or non-fat milk, but you can't make it with ultra-high temperature processed milk. The curds simply will not form. Heat the milk and citric acid mixture over medium-low temperature until it reaches 90 degrees. Stir gently every few minutes. Heating the milk and adding the food-grade citric acid reduces the milk's pH level. As the pH levels reduce, the calcium phosphate in the casein micelles dissolve and is replaced by hydrogen. This increases the stretch of the cheese that the mozzarella is known for. A good thermometer is essential in the cheese-making process. It is important to reach the temperatures listed to ensure your cheese-making efforts are successful. Keep stirring and checking until you reach 90 degrees. Once you've reached 90 degrees, remove the pot from the heat and add in your dissolved rennet mixture and stir gently for 30 seconds. Cover and let the rennet do its magic. What's happening during this magic time? Rennet is an enzyme used to coagulate milk in order to form a thick curd. When rennet is introduced to the milk, the rennet collapses the outer layer of the casein micelles. This means there's nothing between the casein micelles to keep them apart. They bind together, condense the fat cells, and drain the whey, making a protein chain. After about 5 minutes, the curd should be formed. It should be jello-like and pull away from the sides. If it's not ready yet, that's okay. You're just going to cover it again and check in another 5 minutes. It took me about 10 minutes to reach this consistency, so patience is key. Once it's set, you cut the cheese gently in a checkerboard or crosshatch pattern with a knife and place the pot back over low heat. The good news is, once you've reached this stage, you have curds and you've technically made cheese. Yay! If you've accidentally stirred the curds a little too hard or they didn't set as you'd like, we did provide a cheesecloth to help with the next process. You want to just keep stirring very, very gently and bring the temperature back up to 105 degrees. Once you've reached 105 degrees throughout the pot, then remove the pot from heat. Now you're going to gently scoop out the curds into a strainer and squeeze out all the whey. Once the curds are all scooped out, let them stand for a few minutes. If your curds are too small, try draining them with a cheesecloth instead of the strainer. You really want to remove as much of the liquid as possible. The cloudy yellowish liquid left behind in the pot is called the whey. It contains one of the 2 main proteins in milk that was expelled during our cheese making process. The next step will be to pull the cheese. You can do this either using the hot whey or a microwave. I found it was a little easier and faster to use the microwave. If you choose to pull the cheese using the hot whey, you want to be sure to reheat the whey to at least 180 degrees and make sure the cheese sections reach 135 degrees before you begin to pull. No matter what method you're using to pull the cheese, you'll need to add 1 tablespoon of salt to the hot whey. Your curd should now be in a single mass. Once thoroughly drained, place on a cutting board and divide into 3 sections. Place the pieces into a bowl of hot whey. The cheese will be extremely hot when pulling, so it's important to put on clean kitchen gloves for the rest of this process. Place one cheese section into a microwave bowl and heat for 1 minute in the microwave. Pour out any additional whey and slowly pull your pans apart. Now is the time to add seasoning if desired. Next time, I'd plan to add a little bit of salt. The cheese should stretch easily. If it's not stretching, it's likely not hot enough or has cooled. Heat for an additional 30 seconds and pull again. The cheese should be stretchy, shiny, and smooth. Wrap the cheese on itself and form a ball, tucking the sides under. You now have mozzarella cheese. I'll be using my cheese the next day, so I placed them in a bowl of salted whey for 10 to 15 minutes. Once they cooled, I put them in the refrigerator. And now on to making our flatbread. Your kit for flatbread will include active dry yeast, sugar, flour, salt, Italian seasoning. You provide the olive oil and the fresh mozzarella we just made. Other tools needed are a bowl, clean kitchen towel, measuring cups and spoons, and a cookie sheet. Some optional ingredients include garlic or garlic powder, sliced tomatoes, basil, tomato sauce, or other pizza toppings as you desire. I'll also be using a mixer with a dough hook, pizza stones, a rolling pin, silicone mat, pastry brush, knife, and cutting board. To get started, add 1 teaspoon of yeast and 1 teaspoon of sugar and 3/4 cup of warm water to a bowl. The water should be about 110 degrees. Stir and then cover with a clean kitchen towel and set aside for 5 minutes. While the yeast is fermenting, you can cut the garlic or any of the other fresh ingredients you might be adding to the dough. To get the little tiny uniform pieces, I cut like you cut an onion. Slice 3 or 4 times horizontally, 3 or 4 times vertically, and then chop again in the opposite direction. When your 5 minutes is over, your yeast should look frothy. You want to add now the rest of the ingredients. 1 tablespoon of olive oil, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. I'm going to add the garlic, but if you prepared other ingredients for the dough, now is the time to add them. And then you're going to add the flour, 2 cups of flour, and don't forget the salt, and mix it up. I'm using a mixer with the dough attachment, but you can certainly do this process by hand if you don't have a mixer available. Once the dough has come together, it'll look thick and shaggy. You can move on to kneading by hand. Sprinkle your work surface with flour and work the dough until it becomes smooth. Oil a large bowl and place the dough inside. Cover with a clean kitchen towel and leave rest for 45 minutes at room temperature. I usually place mine in a cold oven. While your dough is resting, now is the time where you can prepare any of your flatbread toppings. I'm going to take the cheese that we made yesterday and make some kind of thin slices so that I can put it on top. And then I'm also going to take one of the other balls of cheese and I'm going to grate it a little bit so that I can have some grated cheese for a pizza-like topping. I like tomatoes on my flatbread, so I'm going to cut the tomatoes. I like to season them with salt and pepper. And then I drain my tomatoes between 2 pieces of paper towels so that it removes most of the water and I don't end up with a soggy pizza. Once the 45 minutes has passed and the dough has risen, preheat your oven to 475 degrees. Place the dough on a lightly floured surface or silicone mat and punch down. This releases any gases that have formed while resting. Cut into sections. I cut into 4 small flatbreads, but you can do 1 or maybe even 2 or smaller ones, whatever works for you. Gently pull or roll your dough. A wise librarian once told me to start the dough in the shape that you want it to be and then roll it out. This is something I've never really been very good at. As you can see, I end up with 1 square, 2 mostly odd-shaped squares, and then a triangle. Once you've shaped your dough, you're going to transfer them to a parchment-lined baking pan, or I'm using pizza stones. You're going to poke your fingers on the surface and then brush with olive oil. And then you top with your toppings as desired. I'm using some leftover spaghetti sauce, of course the cheese we cut and grated, the tomato, and some fresh basil. You're going to repeat the process that you just did with the rest of your pieces of dough. This is my triangle-shaped dough that I totally intended to make a heart-shaped pizza of. For this one, I'm only going to use some cheese, tomato, and basil. And then once it's all done, you're going to bake them for 15 to 20 minutes until they're brown. And then you're going to slice and serve warm. I did have some leftover cheese, and it was delicious to put with some fresh basil, olive oil, balsamic vinegar to make kind of a little salad. And it was great. I hope you had fun making cheese and flatbread. Don't forget to show us what you make. We'll see you next time.